Please welcome director Pablo Larraín. Welcome back, Pablo.
Hola, hola.
Pablo, when I introduced the film, I told them, I reminded them that this is a fable, what you put in the credits before the film starts. Can you tell us about when did you latch on to the idea of playing this like a inside-out fable, or like a fable, a fairy tale?
Well, we actually put that later in the process because we thought that it was important to clarify it, even though maybe for me it's not necessary. I don't think that that a biopic is actually possible. Mm-hmm. I've worked with real people in movies. But I think the biopic as a concept is a bit of a fantasy. I don't think you can actually capture anyone in a movie. Mm-hmm. So what you can do is always to create a fictional take throughout things that you care about that person, mm-hmm. Throughout admiration, and yeah. So we decided to do that. I think it's. The word fable, it's just also very beautiful as a word, what it means, and it has some poetry in it. But yeah, it's just.
Well, what I love about it is that growing up reading fairy tales, there's dark undertones to all the fairy tales, whether it's Sleeping Beauty or Rapunzel. There is this dark, horrific moments in it, and you, in this film, there are moments that are dark, and can you talk about those moments, like the pearl necklace, and the moments of where her imagination goes into dark undertones?
Well, I think she went through very difficult times, specifically in the period of where the movie takes place. And I also think that, because I've been hearing a lot, I didn't expect it, I have to say, that the movie sometimes becomes a horror tale. And I say that because I understand it, that we need to classify things and put things in boxes, and in order to communicate to each other. But I do think that once you inhabit someone's perspective, like if I were to choose any of you, or you would choose me, and you would find a way to film what I'm saying in reality, you see a reflection of yourself, you have a memory, you see a picture on your phone, and all that creates a sensation that you are going through something that could be a state of happiness or a state of panic in 1 second to another. And we're adults that try to control that emotions. But in reality, if you're able to film what you're feeling or what you're seeing, and you're putting on a screen, and then of course if there's music, it could go to a place that is very dark. But I think we work with that and create a very high pressure on her, on the character. So when she's finally ready to move on with her life and understand that her identity can be unrelated to that institution, then we found a movie, which is someone that is basically able to walk out of that house with her kids and understand that she can be what she wants to do by herself.
There's also another genre, and correct me if I impose my beliefs in it, but I love the fact that it's like a prison break movie, that she's getting out of
Steve Knight, a writer, used to say that about this movie. It's a jailbreak movie. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did. Yeah.
And can you elaborate on that take of the film, the fact that is...
But it's interesting because I think I feel a lot of compassion for the rest of the characters of this film. Mm-hmm. because I think that everyone there has a similar problem. They all were born in a context, in a family, in a situation where just can't leave out of there. And they are somehow prisoners of the same logic. If you think about Charles, he's a man who was in love with another woman and had to marry Diana because he was told to do so. And then after all these years, we know the story, he ended up with her again. You know, so he had to go through a marriage that he didn't want originally. Because he's also trapped in the wheels of tradition and history, like everyone there. So you're born in privilege. You're born in, you know, you have access to many things. Your life is very particular. You have all these incredible things, but at the same time, you cannot live that life. So you become, you know, somehow a witness of the repetition of others. You're there to repeat what others have made and to somehow, you know, be that spiritual connection for a nation and a culture. And that role is not easy, especially if you don't choose it. So everyone lives in that same structure, and she's the one that is invited to be part of it. And that's the fairy tale, right? The prince, Mr. Princess, then, you know, they get married, have this beautiful family, and then they live forever in love. And it just doesn't happen. And then eventually she decides, look, I just don't want to be here. I can't be with you. And she leaves. And when we made the movie, at the beginning, I thought I was first making a movie for my mom, right? Because she doesn't love many of my movies. So I said, okay, I'll do one that she likes. So let's do one about Diana. You know, my mom's been wearing dresses and cutting her hair for 40 years, just like Diana. You know? So I was, let's make a movie about Diana. And my brother produced it, so we did it together. And then when making the movie that I thought it was about identity, I realized that we were making a movie about motherhood. Thanks to those kids. You know, I'm not talking about the characters also, but we shot it in pandemic times, so the kids couldn't go home after we wrapped every day. So they were with us, even when they were not called to be filming. And those kids, you know, I had the same age by then. Yeah. So I kind of saw my reflection on them, and I understood that something very relevant for her, if not the most relevant, were those kids. Mm-hmm. And it kind of connected the cycle with my own initial desire to make a movie for my mother, and then I was making a movie about a mother as well. So
yeah, no, both strains are there. Especially, I just saw the last bit where the KFC drive-in asks for her name, and she latches on to her identity. She said, "I'm Spencer," and she's with her kids. So it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Well, before I forget, what has your mother? She's seen it. What did she think of the film?
Well, I was there, so she didn't have much choice. But
come on, mothers sometimes speak the truth.
I know. She loved it. She thought that she wanted more scenes with the Queen. You know, that was. And I'm like, Mom, it's not about that. It was like, but no, she thought that that Kristen did a beautiful work, because I don't think my mom maybe have seen a movie with Kristen before, so she didn't really know who she was, but for her it was Diana, all the way from the very beginning, and that was very beautiful, and she got lost in the character, and my mom's a fan of The Crown too. So she was like, okay, what is this? You know, you're competing with a very good show, Pablo, you know? And I'm like, okay, let's have a look. But she really loved it. And it was beautiful because we talked about her as a mother, not only because what happens in the film, but also because we know that those guys, you know, William and Harry, are around today. And it's probably the first thing that I think when I see them, I remember Diana. So I see her legacy in those boys, in those guys. So it's very interesting as a cultural operation. But my mom was very engaged with her and with Kristen's job. So that was very beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. Following on what you said about your mom's reaction to Kristen Stewart, what is incredible about her performance is that it's not that she fully becomes Diana. She becomes a mixture of Kristen and Diana, and it's something. I don't recall a performance like the one that it recalls like something out of a 1950s, 1940s movie star where it's mysterious, but she gives us at the same time so much about her. You know, can you tell us about creating that performance with Kristen?
What is interesting about this sort of cultural icons, right, like Diana, is that we think we know a lot because there's a lot of information. There are pictures, documentaries, movies, and there are TV programs, and in reality, we know nothing about her. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I spent 3 years reading whatever I could find and saw everything and made this movie, and I have no idea who she was. It's really hard because she was very mysterious. There's something on her that creates such a magnetism, which is completely unexplainable for me. Why are we, so many of us are so interested in her life if we can't really understand it? We think we do, because we see parallels of our own life in her destiny, in her life, and the things that she went through. So that magnetism required the same level of mystery from the actress that would play her. And it's what it happens to me when I see Kristen on screen. Like, because unlike my mom, I did see all the movies, and I know her work really well. And she did a couple of movies with Olivier Assayas.
Yeah, Personal Shopper.
And Klaus of Sils Maria. Yeah. And especially in Personal Shopper, there's something uncrackable on her. So that cocktail of mystery that she has, and combined with Diana, is exactly what you were saying. I'm so happy you see the same. It's a mix of them. And there's something that even though she would express what she's feeling, we understand what she's going through, and there's a lot of clarity on what the character is going through. You see her and you cannot completely understand it. Mm-hmm. And that creates a very interesting engagement with the audience, which is a very cinematic and beautiful process. And I completely agree. I think it's more like those movie stars from the 40s or 60s, that you were looking at them, and there's some beautiful, interesting magnetism that happens throughout the process of filmmaking. There's a lens involved. We'll never forget that. Maybe Kristen would be dressed as Diana right here, and it would be something different. There's something that happens. I cannot explain it, and that's probably why I do this.
Well,
It's just that once you film someone, and it goes through the process of a lens being captured by a film or a sensor or whatever, goes into a wire, and then it's projected, and it creates an illusion that it's, I don't like to say the word magic, because that's for something else, but something that is undescribable, and that has some poetry in it.
Speaking of the visual style of the film, that is magic, it's cinematic, I want to ask you about working with your director, photographer, Claire Temen, who'd done Portrait of a Lady on Fire. You shoot 60 millimeter. You also shoot in this wide angle shots, and the camera is always so close to her face, to Diana's face. Can you tell us about those choices and the process of working with Claire?
Well, Claire Mathon is an incredible artist, and she's very particular and has a very specific sensibility. And I knew that it was important for me to be very close. And I can operate myself, but I felt that it was better to have someone with a different sensibility in between Kristen and myself, not just because of the way that she lights and the way that she, work around color, and those things are very important, but there's an aspect of the process itself, is how you actually film it. Mm-hmm. and it can be very intimidating. So having Claire, because it's like this, Really, it's like this distance. I'm sorry. Eh?
No, hey, I like it.
All right, here we go. No, but it's like this.
Yeah.
You know, it's really, really close, and it becomes a thing that could be very stressful and annoying for an actor, you know, to have. And then they got along really well, and they were like I wouldn't say dancing, but it was like they would listen the way they, you know, the breath, you know, they were breathing very close to each other, and they had a camera in the middle. And then at some point they were able to create the character and the movie.
Mm-hmm. And it translates to us because I explain to my students that, you know, the camera, the proxemics of the camera is that the closer we are, we create an intimate relationship with what we're seeing. So the shots are very important, the distance that, you know, from what we're watching. So Claire creates this incredible intimacy.
If you're far, you could probably get to a very similar size with a longer lens, right?
Correct.
So if you have a wider lens and you're closer, you feel that on the screen. Eventually becomes the same interaction. But look, there are great movies made with long lenses, and there are filmmakers who can really manage to do that. I can't. I wouldn't know how to do it. I need to be close. And this was one step further than anything I've done before. There's some fractions of Jackie that we use the same, but we took it really far in this one to be really, really close. But eventually, you feel that you are experiencing what that person is experiencing. And that's another thing that Kristen has. It's incredible that she lets you in so you can experience what she's experiencing, but at the same time, you see her. So it's like seeing someone and at the same time seeing what she's seeing through that person.
And then in the same equation, you feel like you're inside her head by that same process.
Exactly. And also what is very important for that operation is every other actor. Because it's like Shakespeare. The king is being built by everyone else, not by the king. So it's all the other incredible cast, like Tim Spall, Sally Hawkins, Sean Harris, those kids, Stella Gonnet, our queen. They all let you believe that she's Diana because they behave like if they would be in front of her. And they're, you know, very beautiful and wonderful English actors that they were there and they were just creating this proper ambient. If you wouldn't really connect and understand that that world is being built by those other actors, the whole movie would fall down in a second.
The sound, Johnny Greenwood, the score, you mix Baroque music with jazz. And it creates this incredible sensory experience. You know, can you tell us about working with Johnny and developing the score?
Well, I'm a big admirer of his work, so it was great news when he decided to work with us and collaborate. And he brought this idea. He wanted to work around whatever we could think that royal music could sound like. That's like a very Baroque, sort of hiding type of composition. So he did that through his style. And then eventually he came with the idea of combining it with jazz. And I'm like, okay. And then he started sending ideas and built this very internal space. And then when we cut the movie, we left the jazz just for her. If you look at it, it's the trumpet and the jazz compositions only come in when she's by herself or going through a scene that no one else is really interacting with her. And then there's some pieces of jazz and Baroque, that is when she's interacting, and when the family is included, it's just Baroque music. So we created something that was somehow supporting her internal panic, her internal distress, and eventually her freedom too. Because jazz is a very, free way of composing music that has different layers and emotions. And one of them is it could unleash you and take you somewhere else. So it was a very interesting, because also he sent most of his music, or 2/3 before we start shooting. The very last weeks of pre-production, I got a lot of it. And then in the first 2 weeks, I got more. So I would play it on the set, and it gave me a lot of instincts around pace and rhythm. Movies are made, we don't talk about it enough, I think, are made out of rhythm, and how fast that person walks, how fast they talk, and how slow is it, what's the pace, what's the tone. And music not only help us to create the movie that we have, but also to process it as we made it. So I had everyone really annoyed, because on a set, movie set, people want to hear themselves, right? And they have radios and people's working. And I would play it loud, and it was very important for us and for Kristen to feel what this was going to look like. And then when we did the dancing montage, we filmed it every day with different music that I would play on set.
Different costumes and
different things. And then Johnny brought that music.
Amazing. The production design, it is, you clear the halls. Normally, if we watch The Crown or other period pieces, there's so much detail and furniture. Instead, you cleared the halls, which is very unsettling for us, the viewers. Can you tell us about that choice?
Yeah,
production.
Guy Henry Diaz, our production designer, came up with that idea, that in the biggest spaces, he would clear it out. And his reference to do that was Citizen Kane. So he would just, I couldn't believe it. When he said it, and then we slowly saw it, but then in the very last days before we started filming, I would get into the location in these huge castles, and we had all these trucks outside with all the furniture. And I'm like, Guy, what are you doing? And he says, this is fine, And then we would walk into the living room, and he would overstuff them. So it was really a mental extension of the main character in those spaces. So she would walk into the wait scene at the beginning, and there's nothing in it, just Tim Spall and the waiting machine. There's nothing else. And then she would walk into these very empty hallways, but then she would get into the dining room, and it's full of people and paintings and furniture, and then he would walk again to the hallway, and it would be empty. So it's really a psychological extension of oppression, of history, and loneliness too. Because she's surrounded by people, guards, all kind of the structure of the institution, but she's as alone as possible. So that needed a reflection.
And then on the same vein, the costumes. I love the fact that there is sometimes, it's very accurate, things that I've seen Diana wear that we recognize, and then the costume designer makes a choice that it doesn't fit in. And then it goes back to accurate things. Can you talk about that dance that the costume designer...
Well, I love it so much. It's the best. We work with Jacqueline Duran, who's really a very gifted, brilliant woman. So we worked around hundreds of, or maybe 1,000 of pictures. Then we chose what we like. We chose what was accurate for the period. And then Chanel got involved, thanks to Kristen. And so they offered many things. And we chose certain things, and then we had made other things. It was a whole very long process that it took us a very long time to make them and to choose it really well. And then we had a very huge rack of things that we loved that it didn't make it to any scenes. And that is what is on the dancing montage. So one of the reasons that I wanted to do it was not only because it was relevant for the film to have that moment when she unleashes herself and is able to go through her memories of childhood and when she was a dancer and when she was a mom, when she got married, and all that process of memory that she has, but also because it was a good chance to explore her fashion. And I think there's a lot of, her identity in the way that she chose certain things. They're very iconic for a lot of us maybe, but for herself, she was very bold in choosing those dresses or those outfits back in the day. So yeah, I think it's beautiful, and I do consider fashion as an art form. It can be an art form.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that it's a 3-day period, one setting, was that always Stephen Knight, your screenwriter, and the idea that we were going to zero her whole life in a 3-day period?
Yeah, that was the original idea. That somehow it's a sequel in that respect to Jackie. It's just to compress someone's, identity or through those very specific 3 days, and to find a very big crisis that she could go through, and that crisis was, the ending of that marriage, that relationship. And then Steve found the idea of doing it Christmas, and he developed the script. But I do think that if you want to know someone, you better do it on a crisis. Good times are easy, and it doesn't really show who we are up until we are in trouble. And it was just interesting to do that. And it's probably days that really define her life. And we were in England promoting the film, and a lot of people were saying, look, it's not exactly how it happened, and because it's a very slow process. It was announced by the Queen in 1994, and we were like, we know, we understand, it's a movie, we needed to compress it, it's what we do, and it's a movie.
But following, I prefer your versions of biographies better than any other filmmaker. But is that something that you are intentionally doing? Like, with Neruda and Jackie in this film, you're breaking ground in the way that biographies are being done visually. Is that something that you're doing that drives you? It's like, I'm going to break the rules.
Not really. I think that what I want to do is just movies that I could like as an audience, and movies that could just have a different take. I don't. It's hard to explain it. I don't know. I don't have a plan or a very specific idea on what to do in that respect. But I do want to do things that they feel fresh to me and that I could feel passionate about. I've spent a lot of hours of my life lately doing press and trying to explain this. And, I always remember Stanley Kubrick when he was asked, why do you do 70 takes of the same thing? Why do you choose? What is the motivation for you to realize that take 61 is the one that you like? And he said, because it feels right. I'm not him, for sure, but the biggest motivation is just to do something that makes you feel right and that makes sense, and that it only operates in a more spiritual sensibility that is not really rational, I guess.
Well, keep doing what you're doing because it's amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pablo, for being here.
Thank you so much.